Welcome to another episode of Soul Centre, the podcast. I'm your host, Jaynie Morris, and today we have a very special treat just for you. Now, each and every one of our episodes, we always love to bring you guests that have a story to tell, an insight on good health, well-being, fitness, longevity, and biohacking, which we've added in recently as well. Today's guest has something more than just insight. Her passion, her fuel for her life, which is in the sports industry, is not just about the sports industry. It's about the people behind the sports industry. It's about the cultures behind the sports industry. She is a world-renowned journalist, and I'm going to say world-renowned because I have done more than just my research. I've been following this amazing woman for a very, very long time. I haven't been stalking her, but, I have been. And when I found out that she had written a book that is coined somewhat as a memoir, but it's more than just a memoir. It brings in all of the things that she sees through the lens of not just her eyes, but through what she has coined now the title of her book. Tracey Lee Holmes has written the book, The Eye of the Dragonfly, My Life Seeing the World Through Sport. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to her today on Soul Centred, the podcast. Welcome, Tracey.
Thank you so much for having me. And when you started doing that introduction, talking about all the things that you like to bring with your guests, health, wellness, biohacking, I'm thinking none of those apply to me.
But they do, the people that you...
Yes. I look at a lot of people.
Thank you for that. Tracey, for over 4 decades now, you have been more... Well, I know that you... And correct me if I'm wrong on any areas of this. I know that you probably don't like being known as or referred to as a sports journalist.
No, journalist is fine. I don't like being referred to as a sports reporter.
Oh, reporter, that was it. Exactly. Now, so on that, for over 4 decades now, you have been known more as a sports journalist of a storytelling nature. And you do that with such insight and authenticity, and when people are listening to your podcast, when they're listening to all of the work that you've been doing over your incredible career in the sports industry, I'm sure that those who have seen that and witnessed that and experienced that would agree that you are that storyteller. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as to why and how that is with you?
I think it's because when I was young, Mum and Dad were both professional surfers. This is in the era when professional surfing was really just being born. My dad was a surfboard maker, and Mum and Dad both competed. We went to South Africa because Dad heard the surf was good there. I was about 2 when we left Manly in Sydney, hopped on a boat and for 17 days travelled across the ocean, and this sort of life of exploring began. And my mother was involved in organising a surfing contest in Durban, South Africa, which is still running. So it's the world's longest running professional event. And people came in from everywhere to compete at that event. This was during apartheid in South Africa. So surfers from Hawaii who were black came in and had stamped into their passports honorary white visa. But they couldn't go into any of the hotels that were for whites only, into any of the cafes or restaurants for whites only, even some of the beaches that were for whites only. So my mum saw this and said, this is not good, just come and stay at our place. So our place turned into Surf Party Central every night. And I was very young, listening to all these stories, all these different accents, people telling about places that just seemed so extravagant and far away. And it just set off a lifetime of wonderment, I think, and just hearing people tell their own story in their own way has always fascinated me. And then how that all fits together, how we create one world out of all of that. And so I've been so lucky to have had a career in telling other people's stories. I feel very, very blessed.
So with the with starting out in life and being like that and being in a family where sport, obviously, was, I mean, surfing's fabulous, to have that and to be traveling like that. Was that what ignited you into your passion of all sports, of being a part of all of that? Where did that all come from?
Yeah, I think when I was at school, Mum obviously encouraged my sister and I. She's 4 years younger than me. To compete, and I had absolutely zero interest in competing in sport. So I played everything at school, did the usual. But that side of it wasn't for me. My sister became a pro surfer, but I was always, when Mum would make me go out in these contests, I'd sit out the back and I'd think, okay, my plan is I've got this really great strategy. I won't catch a wave, and that means I won't get through to the next round. But I had to do something sitting out the back, and so I would talk to all of my opponents, all of the competitors that I was supposedly against, and I'd get their life stories. And so I started doing this at a really young age, just talking to people and asking them questions and finding out about them and why they were different and what made them tick. And so when I actually had to find a job to make a living and have a career, I thought there was a whole lot of other things that I was interested in as well, but there was nothing like the sports environment because, it can be highly competitive, but it brings absolutely everything else that you see in the world is played out on that field, on that court, on that track, whatever the sport is. And you see the politics, the culture, the clashes, the friendships, everything. It's all encapsulated there. But sports people themselves are incredibly focused. They get beaten, they get knocked down, they get back up again, and they re-strategize. Okay, how do I get better next time? How do I, beat that opponent next time? What was wrong with my strategy? And I just loved that very positive environment. Some people don't think it's positive. I think it's a really positive environment. Most other places, most other industries, I think it kind of humdrum, but this is just full of energy all the time, and I thought, that's me.
So, The Eye of the Dragonfly, great title. Absolutely love it. What was it that inspired you to, or what was it that made you think, okay, I'm going to write a book. Now's the time for me to write a book and call it The Eye of the Dragonfly. I'm intrigued, Tracey.
I had no idea what I was going to call the book. I had a working title that was Don't Call Me a Sports Reporter. And then I thought, that's a really negative title. I don't really want a negative title when I've worked in an industry that's so positive.
Yeah.
So my husband and I have a little place, 5 acres in the country between Sydney and Melbourne, a little town called Adelong. And Adelong is actually a place that is special to both of us because my husband is Wiradjuri and it's part of Wiradjuri country. But it's also the place where my great-great-grandfather came from China. He was a Chinese doctor and he came out here with all the miners. And in Adelong, it was a booming mining town back in the 1850s. So he was there treating the miners. And when my husband bought this place, I was visiting my father who'd had a stroke. And so only one person could go into the hospital. It was during COVID. Mm-hmm. Stan was left out in the car, which is a bad place to leave Stan. He should not be left alone at any time. When I came back out, he said, I've just bought a place. It's like, what? Where? He said, Adelong. And he said, have you heard of it? I went, heard of it? It's where my dad's from. It's where his whole family's from. And then we found out later this kind of Chinese link and heritage. But where the gold mine is, there's these beautiful pools. And the creek runs down the bottom of our property. We walk along the creek to the pools. And we swim through the summer. And every time we swim, these electric blue dragonflies come and hover around, and they're so incredible. They're incredibly fast and beautiful and elegant. They go up, down, backwards, forwards. And I realised I actually hadn't known very much about dragonflies, so I did some research. They've got a 360-degree view. And I thought, how incredible. That's always what I've tried to do with my stories, to not tell it from my side, but to try and tell it from all of those other sides, everybody that's impacted in this story. And I thought, okay, there's the title of my book.
It's, well, a great story behind the title, indeed. And one of the things that I'm sorry, you've just thrown me with the stand in the car business. I think stand in the car with a phone.
With a phone, with the internet.
Yeah, with the internet.
With realestate.com.
Yeah, exactly. Tracey, you've never shied away from the intersection of sport, politics, and humanity in general, as you've already started to cover anyway in our chat today. Reading your book and going through, I've seen that I've actually as the reader for feedback, I've actually seen that it's very much peppered with that as the main message. Which I really appreciate a lot. So with that in mind, in your view, what role should journalists play in the industry of sports when it comes to that? Because so many sports actually get impacted by those areas, don't they?
They do, and I think it's up to the journalist to be as informed as possible. And I think if I just think about, a current story, for instance, one that's, been in the news this week around transgender people competing in sport, transgender women particularly, and the way that most of those stories are covered, they keep using photos of a South African runner called Caster Semenya, who is not transgender, or the Algerian boxer that we saw in Paris in 2024 who won a gold medal. She is not transgender. These are athletes that have a syndrome called DSD, differences of sex development, completely different to people who transition from one gender to another. And even that, it really disappoints me that so long after we've seen transgender people playing sport as they should, because sport should be for everybody, it's been decades now. And some journalists still can't get that right. And I think it's a real misrepresentation. And it's not fair for the audience, for people reading those stories or consuming those stories, because our job is to try and inform people, not to make up their minds for them. The audience is really free to make up its own mind on anything, but at least arm them with the facts so they can make up their best mind possible. And that disappoints me when I see that not being done in the best way. And I think maybe that's one reason why I've had this angst against the word sports reporting, because it centred so much on, the game, the match report, the injuries. Nothing wrong with that. I've got no problem with that, and lots of people do it very well. But because I've been so obsessed with this other part of the world and life and politics and all of that intersection that you were talking about, it's a different thing, and I think it brings a different level of responsibility. And I wish journalists spent, the time that it takes to research some of these more complex things, rather than just shooting off, the first thing that comes out of their mind when they haven't really looked and discovered and tried to see it from the other person's point of view, walk a mile in my shoes kind of thing.
In your experience, do you see or do you feel that when journalists / reporters who aren't quite there on that level are dictated in how they do that by the organisations that they work for?
I don't think
does
there's
that play a role?
I don't think there's as much of that as people might imagine. But what happens is you become what you're surrounded by. And so it's almost self-censorship. It's almost a subconscious, self-censorship. And so if people kind of take particular views and you're working there and you're surrounded by that, you become part of that. It's very hard to fight that all the time. And I can speak from experience, because I felt like I've spent a lot of my life, bashing my head against a brick wall because I don't always see it the same way as other people. And I try very hard not to be bent by the people around me, but more... And sometimes it's not easy to tell, and sometimes the stories are not pleasant to tell, but it's not my job to judge that. It's my job just to tell the story so other people can make their mind up. And so if anyone has tried to sort of influence me or in a negative way, steer me away from a particular direction and say, no, we're reporting it this way, I've never acquiesced.
And obviously, I'm not going to give too much away about your incredible book, but I do remember reading one particular section in there where you very much did put your foot down in that regard and walked away. And we'll come to that. I'd like to come to that if we can as well. But also in what you've just said, Tracey, I mean, one of the hallmarks of your characters is that you have been and you continue to break down a lot of barriers. Being the first woman to, be the lead for the grandstand and many other areas in your career, you come across personally as a courageous woman in that area, but you don't do it with, I'm going to break these barriers down. You come to it from the place, I'm assuming you come to it from the place of this is the right thing to do. Would that be correct?
That would be correct.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty, I think I see a lot of people today, and this concerns me a lot, people who are unsure about who they are, because I think must be very difficult in not knowing who you are and how you fit into the world today. And it's so complex now, social media, the algorithm, everything. We're just being bombarded with stuff, and you've got to find your place in that. But, I think really it was an advantage when we lived in South Africa. Perhaps one of the few advantages at the time was that there was no television. Television had been banned because the white minority government didn't want the black majority knowing how the rest of the world lived.
Wow.
So television was banned. We didn't have one. And it wasn't until we moved to Hawaii that there was television. And I remember my mum calling my sister and I in, come and look at this, girls, because we'd never seen it. And it was like, oh, yeah, so what? And we went back outside again. So television's never been a big thing for me. But and I think that helped us know who we were from very early on. Because when I think about, if I go back, through the years, through the decades and back to when I was a little kid, I don't feel very different to the way I felt then. It's like I've always known who I am and the path that I was going to be on. Not that I knew I was going to be in journalism or work in sport or any of those things, but I knew the type of person I was. And yes, unflinching maybe is the word.
You've been, and again I'll say it, you've been and you continue to layer that over what you do so beautifully. In The Eye of the Dragonfly, you write about sport as a mirror of life, and you've already touched on that as well. Can we go into that a little bit more? Can you share to our audience today what it is in The Eye of the Dragonfly that you believe so strongly represents that?
Look, I think I've also been incredibly lucky because having that experience in South Africa and then the Hawaiian surfers that came across, when they got back to their home, their parents wrote to my parents and said, our sons would not have survived that trip without you, and we'd like to repay the favour. So my dad said, you beauty, we're moving to Hawaii.
Surf's up.
Exactly. So we did. We moved to Hawaii and we lived with this family. They're a very famous family called the Ikaus, and there's a very famous sticker that a lot of surfers have on their bumper bar on the car that says Eddie would go, because Eddie Aikau was one of the most famous big wave riders. And he was a lifeguard at Waimea Bay, which is incredibly dangerous when the surf comes up. Lots of tourists get stuck, and he rescued many, many people while he was alive. But we moved in with the Ikaus, and they were caretakers of an old Chinese graveyard. So you came off the road and you drove down through the tombstones and to the bottom of the graveyard, and there were some little caretaker cottages there, and we lived in the caretaker cottages with them. And I walked across a little bridge, across a little stream to my school next door. So again, my life was very unusual, was an unusual upbringing. And then later on in life, when Stan and I moved overseas, again, we lived in a tiny little fishing village in Hong Kong. Then we moved to that huge metropolis of Beijing. Then we went to the Middle East for a few years and then back to Beijing. So we've given our kids a similar experience. And what you see is that no matter where people are from, what drives them is exactly the same thing that drives you and me. You want to try and be happy. you want to try and have an element of success, however you define that, whether that means you can pay the rent comfortably at the end of each week and you can look after your kids well, or if it means you like to save up your money and go on a big holiday at the end of the year. Whatever success means to you, that's what people want. And they want to make sure that when they have kids, that it's going to be better for them when they grow up. So it's this sort of constant seeking of improvement and enjoying your life, having a good life. That's what most people want. So it's no different. So you strip away the different looks, the different skin colour, the different languages, the different food, and it's all the same. You know, it's like when we test our genetics. We're all made up of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that I've always been interested in sort of like putting the jigsaw puzzle together. And sport tells us all of that. So for example, when I was at the FIFA World Cup in France, 98, and that dates me. I mean, you think, God, the first Olympics I did was 1992. You tell some people these days, they go, I wasn't born yet.
Oh, it's all right. You're in good company here.
But at the Paris FIFA World Cup, and I remember going to a press conference, and it was the captain of one of the South American teams. His name was Chilavert. He was a goalkeeper and, you know, quite an aggressive character, but larger than life. So I walked into this press conference room and he was sitting at the desk. He was biting an apple and it was packed full of mostly South American journos because that team was of interest to them. And the team had been doing quite well. And somebody asked him a question, you know, how are you coping with the pressure? Because now the team's into the next round, you know, you're out of the group stage, you're into the playoffs. And he just glared at this person that asked the question. He threw his apple across the room and he said, pressure. Don't talk to me about pressure if you're talking about football. We are playing a game. I'll tell you what pressure is. Pressure is people in my country who don't know how they're going to feed their kids this week. That's pressure. If you want to talk to me about pressure, we'll talk about that, but not a game of football. And I thought, how amazing is that? So it's always that kind of perspective that I've gone looking for at these sporting events, and they're there. You know, these little beautiful gems that tell you so much about people and the world.
The Eye of the Dragonfly. Why now? Why?
Well, I knew I was going to leave the ABC at the end of 23. Actually, I thought I'd stay around for Paris 24, and I just couldn't. So
Can we talk about that?
you can if you like.
It's in the book.
Look, I've been in and out of the ABC several times, and you know, I was saying to someone yesterday, I still talk about we, and then catch myself when I'm talking about the ABC. You know, we do this, we do that, or we should, we shouldn't. You know, so I'm always going to have that. You know, it's like a member of the family when you've spent so much time in and out of one particular organisation. And it's also the place that taught me so much. When I first came in as a sports trainee, when ABC used to do those 2-year traineeships, and they were absolutely fabulous. I wish they brought them back. So I was lucky enough to get one of those, and everyone I worked with was a man, an older man, and they taught me everything. And I think I might have taught them a few things too. But they were fabulous, you know. And so when people always talk about, oh, gee, it must have been so hard, it's like, not really, because you take the good and you just discard the bad, you know. Not that there was a lot of it anyway. And I also think this comes back to knowing who I was. And I think that leaves people in no doubt as to who I am. And I think that might have actually prevented some of the you know, the less pleasant stories that I've heard other women have gone through, in particular in that era when we were first sort of breaking through. And we weren't the first anyway. You know, there's a very famous woman here in Adelaide, Marg Ralston, who was phenomenal. She was the first ever female editor, sports editor, of a major metropolitan newspaper. And so she was really breaking down doors. But I think she's probably quite a similar character. You know, she knows who she is, knows what she wants, leaves people in no doubt as to the line she's going to take, and people kind of, you know, find their place around that. But the men I worked with were fabulous. They taught me a lot, and so the ABC's been very special to me. But I I do. I had, several arguments before I left the ABC most recently at the end of 23. And I think they had to do with the fact that I believe very strongly that we have a real responsibility not to tell people what to think. That's not our job. Our job is to give the detail as clearly and succinctly as possible without shredding it, without leaving bits out because we don't like that. And so when I watch a lot of stuff where they laugh constantly at the US president, and I've been guilty of laughing at the US president, but I also understand that this is a man who was elected by the US people. He is still the president. And so if you lose respect for particular officers, and, he'll come and go. There'll be somebody after him. There'll be many people after him. You hope. You hope the world goes on, in the best way possible.
Yes.
So there needs to be these sorts of levels of respect for the office rather than the person occupying it just at that time. And we can't put our own personal biases into everything we do in covering that story. And I think it must be awful for Americans, no matter who they voted for, Democratic or Republican, to come here, watch our news and go, all they're doing is laughing at us.
Yeah.
You can laugh at yourself like we do here in Australia, but we don't want other countries laughing at us.
No.
And so I think those sorts of standards are very important, and I'd hate to see them disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. The can we talk about when you and Stan and the boys travel a lot and have lived in a lot of different countries? In your book, you do talk about in great detail what the boys had to go through in one particular place that you were living as far as schooling and things was concerned. And the reason that I'd like, if it's okay with you, just to go into that a little bit, because it does still relate into the sport industry as well, because we're seeing, well, let's talk about what happened with the boys.
Which
when
story
they were at
is it?
school.
Was it Abu Dhabi?
It was Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Can we talk about that? Because I think
Yeah,
that's,
sure. So everywhere we went, we tried as much as possible to hop into the local environment. So not live in communes with expats, because we thought you can stay in Australia to have that experience. So why don't we try and live how the locals live? And also being journalists, both Stan and I would benefit from that, because we would actually get to know our neighbours who were people from there, or not get to know them, as the case may be, like just feel what the place is like at that level. And so we'd send our kids as much as possible to local schools so they could get local friends. And of course, when these two boys, it was the two younger ones that were at this school in Abu Dhabi, and there were a whole lot of Arab kids from the UAE, and I think there was a German boy, but very few other people. And the German boy was from a Muslim family, and that was it. And, for a lot of the kids at that school, their frame of reference, because the news that they're surrounded by and everything that goes on in that part of the world, which we know very well, it kind of is you're Arab or you're Israeli. And so these two kids popped up from Australia, Indigenous kids, and the local boys were sort of confused. It's like, where are you from? And our boys go, oh, Aussie. And they go, Israeli? It's like, no, Aussie, Australia. And I don't think that was any part of their reference. So they ended up getting into a brawl until our middle son, can look after himself quite well, and he looked after the younger boy quite well, who also manages on his own. And anyway, sorted it all out, got to playing football, soccer, everything was forgiven. Then they realised there's these two strange kids from Australia, like who ever knew where that was? And then they settled in, made incredible friendships after that. But they came home from school this day and, they'd been in the brawl and they had white shirts with a red rose. The school was called Al-Warud, and Al-Warud means the rose. But these white shirts were covered in brown stains. I'm like, what the hell happened? So they told me this whole story. And then they also said, but these stains are coffee stains. I'm like, Jessie, you're 7. what are you doing drinking coffee? It's like, oh, yeah, you have these little coffee shots, while you're playing footy and at lunchtime. It's like, oh, my God, I don't think I had a coffee till I was about 30. So they hopped right into, the local life and ended up having a great experience to the point where, one of our sons now, he's contemplating going back, moving to the Middle East. Because it's so central now and so much is happening from that part of the world, especially if you're talking about sport. He's actually involved in the film industry and, there's a lot of work happening there as well. So, it's been an adventure.
Great story, and also a great example of situations, especially with kids in schools that come from different cultures and what have you, and the perceptions and where that perception is also born from.
Exactly.
My cousin who I grew up with, exactly the same age as me, she was a stolen generation First Nations girl, and in all the good-heartedness of my late auntie and uncle who adopted her at 7 months old, basically, had put her through private school here in Adelaide, and I was in public school here in Adelaide. And the bullying that happened back in those days, so we're talking 60s and 70s, Tracey, the bullying, because she was completely different to all of the others, which unfortunately had ended up in a very tragic situation for Christine. But I'm sharing that with you because I see that continues to happen here in Australia on the level of sport. As well. I've already shared with you I'm a mad 36ers fan. I'm fiercely I always tell anybody who's coming to a 36ers game with me, think that scene out of Pretty Woman when Julie is at the polo, right? That's me at a 36ers game. But I'm a mad, passionate basketball fan, and it concerns me when I do go to games and the AFL, when I do hear things and behaviour, and I see behaviour that I go, that's not Australian. Like, why are we saying?
Well, see,
what's your take on that?
It is Australia. It is. And, it's changed, but there's still a long way to go. I think that's probably the balance of it. But this is interesting. It came out this week, a report from a survey done by Sport Integrity Australia. And they were surveying, I think, 1,200 people, coaches and athletes across 64 different sports, and just getting feedback on a whole lot of different things. What struck me was 91% of athletes said that their sport was safe and fair for everyone who played it, and 89% of coaches said the same thing. When you bury down into the details and what people who said they suffered from whatever degree, bullying, body shaming, racism, there was a fourth one as well. But when you looked at it, it was 7% that said they felt like they were body shamed or bullied, and it was only 4% of those surveyed that said they'd suffered racism. But what was really interesting was that about 20% said they'd seen it, so they recognise it. So the education that they're getting is helping. The next step is reporting that or not tolerating that. But what was interesting is that I then looked back and I looked at workplace bullying in Australia, and it's worse than in sport. So sport gets a bad rap all the time when in fact sport might be doing better than many other places.
Isn't
in our
that
society.
Interesting?
It is. And because it's always in the spotlight and because people talk about it and because people raise these issues with sport because we don't like to see it, it suddenly it sort of is like a bad reputation that they can't get rid of when in fact they're doing a lot of the work and it's improving in that arena. It needs to start flowing outwards and improving in those other arenas. But it's like in this other, I looked at another, health and wellness survey that some government department had done in 2022. It was updated. And they were saying when it comes to bullying, it's like 70% of 12 to 13-year-olds said that they'd been bullied in the past year, most likely in the schoolyard, online or at home, not sport.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that
isn't that
interesting?
interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also one of the things that you just touched on that I want to delve in with you on that, Tracey, is that, I mean, in your opinion, do you believe, and I think I already know the answer, but I've read the book, and I actually have read the book. A lot of people ask me questions on the books and go, oh, was that chapter 4? I actually have. And by the way, to all of our audience, when you get this copy, or when you get your copy of The Eye of the Dragonfly by Tracey Lee Holmes, or if you haven't already got it, you've got to go. As soon as you finish listening to this, make sure you go and get a copy of this, because it is one of those books that when you do start to read it, the storytelling of the memoir and the industry and life itself is so compelling. I absolutely guarantee you won't want to put it down. In fact, you will share it. No, don't share it. Tell people to buy it. But sport is the great global unifier, isn't it? I mean, it's like one of the things that came into my mind when I was reading your book, Tracey, is I had the picture of the Colosseum. And I know that's probably a pretty aggressive visual, but as an example of any sport, the Olympics, the football cups, basketball, cricket, anything, everybody comes together, and for those moments in time, there's no, politics, there's no business, there's no. You agree with that, yeah? And why do you think that is? Why do you think sport is so powerful like that?
Because it's an international language. It's something we all understand. Every person on the planet understands kicking a football and scoring a goal. Everyone does. Everyone understands running 100 metres. Even if you don't end up at that elite level, you've done it as a kid. You know the thrill of running, the freedom, seeing how fast you can go, just having a great time with your friends. So it's a great leveler in that respect, and it's how you understand each other when your languages are so completely different and your cultures may be completely different. And I say this to people a lot, the only place where you can be sitting at a table having a meal and the person opposite you is from North Korea is in the Olympic Village or at the FIFA World Cup. It's the only place it's going to happen. So if you want to build relationships and you want to start healing differences and you want to start understanding where the fault lines are in the world, sport is just the most fantastic place to do that. And I'm studying a master's at the moment in international sports diplomacy with a university in Hungary, actually, Hungarian University of Sports Science. And even our little group, I was in Hungary last week and 10 of us were there. And in that group, we had 2 Egyptians, we had a girl from Ukraine, we had a guy from North Korea, a guy from Belgium. Like the group was just a little mini United Nations, but that's sport every day of the week. It's happening somewhere at that level. And, it's just the perfect place to begin sometimes tough conversations, to try and wrestle through some of the difficulties of life. And if we can understand that North Korean sitting opposite me at the table has completely different lifestyle to mine and comes from a completely different set of circumstances, but together we both want what's best for our children, then we understand each other. And so let's start from there rather than from our multitude of differences, which is not going to lead us anywhere. We've got to start somewhere where we understand each other.
Is that part of the fuel that fires you to advocate for sport athletes around the world that are in war-torn countries, that are in politically disruptive countries, or in any issues, in other countries around the world? Is that part of the fuel that fires you to advocate and help them achieve what they want to do, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think so. I think the most incredibly tough and resilient people in the world are Afghan women. They are incredible. And so one that I've come to know quite well, who was going to compete in the Paralympics in Tokyo, she's got her left arm is only down to the elbow, so she competes in Taekwondo, and it was going to be her first Paralympics, and the Taliban rides in, takes over, shuts the airport, she's stuck. And I just thought, you can't rob her of that experience. She's like outside the airport. She's got to get through. She's got to get to Tokyo and be able to compete. Anyway, through a lot of connections and a lot of phone calls and a lot of, impacting back and forth with different people around the world, she did get onto one of the last flights out of Kabul and got into Tokyo to compete. Since then, she's become a refugee in Paris, and I caught up with her when I went to the Olympics last year. She was one of the first members of the Paralympic refugee team, and she won a bronze medal. So it's the first ever refugee to win a medal at the Paralympics, and she wants to keep going, and she wants to compete in Brisbane in 2032, and she hopes that she goes like from bronze in Paris to silver in LA, and she wants the gold medal in Brisbane. But these people are incredible, and every time they compete, they are so certain and adamant, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for all the women in Afghanistan who now can't go to school, can't have jobs, can't play sport, and just have a terrible life. They're amazing.
Tracey, when you wrote the book, for our listeners and our audience on our YouTube channels as well, what was the number one hope for them reading this or listening to it on Audible? Is it on Audible?
It is, yeah. I've read it. So you can get an ebook.
Good. So what was your hope for this book when you wrote it?
Look, I think, obviously, I just love the world.
You too.
And I love people. And I love how sport can tell us all about people. And I get so frustrated sometimes, and that's an overstatement too, because I never get really frustrated. But if one thing frustrates me, it's that people don't kind of look outwards and just see the incredibleness of the world and all the different stories and the colours and the vibrancy. It's an amazing place, and I'd love everyone to be able to experience that. So it was kind of me just putting on paper why I have always looked at sport a little bit differently, and it's because of my background and the experiences I had as a kid. And I hope it kind of opens a window for other people to go, wow, next time I'm watching a sporting encounter, I'm going to be looking at that. It doesn't really matter how the Aussies do. I mean, it's great when they win all the gold medals in the pool. That's fantastic. But what about all these other stories? Like, what about some of those? And some of the stories that just enthuse us, intrigue us, make us sad sometimes, make us weep because we don't understand where that person comes from or the language they're speaking, but we can see what their achievement means to them. So I just hope that people kind of feel that passion and maybe look at their sport a little bit differently from now on.
What's next for Tracey Lee Holmes?
More of the same. So I'm going to finish this master's degree, and I'd really like to start working on getting a network together of what I am dubbing Sports Ambassadors, which is the name of my podcast at the moment.
Which is great, by the way.
And, tapping into that network, because I think different countries around the world, the US has done it a lot over many years, but we're starting to see other countries now tapping into what sports diplomacy can do. And so it's interesting that Hungary is offering this course at their university. Yeah. It's really fascinating to see what's going on there at the moment, actually. It's quite unique. And, I hope to sort of build a network of Australian sports ambassadors. Of course, every athlete that represents us is an ambassador of types. But what many people might not know is that we have got so many people in the sports industry working in every country in the world, making an impact in all of these countries. And they've really got something to offer, and they're great links between us and the broader world. And I think we're going to need more positive links in the future rather than negative narratives. And I think all of those sports people can play a role in that.
I was just thinking when you were saying that about what you're putting together, maybe we could have some of them run the countries. I'm sorry. That was a personal thing I should not have said, but I did just, again, have this visual of countries being run correctly because we've got, athletes and sports associated individuals who actually get what the world needs. The 2032 Olympics coming up. What's your hope for that?
Look, how blessed is Australia to be hosting a third Olympic Games? There's not very many countries that have done that. And for Brisbane to be able to do it, so we'll put them on a map, very differently to they're already on a map as a tourist destination. But people are going to get to understand Brisbane in a whole different way and therefore Greater Queensland. And that is good for Australia generally. My hope is that, maybe the world is in a bit of a better place by then. We might have sorted out a few of these differences. I think what's happened is the division has just become so wide and you've got left shouting to right and right shouting to left and just stop it. Just stop it. They have this thing called the Olympic truce, and the UN kind of puts it out there for a vote every time an Olympic Games comes around that nations agree to try and stop as much as they can any type of hostilities during the period of the Games, which is why Russia ended up getting suspended or kicked out of the Olympics, because it was still part of the Olympic truce when they invaded Ukraine.
Yes.
And so
I remember that.
Yeah, we're still feeling that impact. But, and it's only symbolic. It probably doesn't mean a lot. But I think symbols are important in life because even though they might be impossible ideals to achieve, at least it gives you something to head towards. Because otherwise, if you're just surrounded by the mayhem and the negativity, I was saying way back before, earlier in the interview, I feel sorry for people who feel lost amongst that because they don't know what they're rooted to. And so I hope that, the world can re-find its roots.
Absolutely. Tracey, if you had an 8-year-old Tracey in front of you right now, what advice would you give her?
I feel like I still am. I feel like I'm still 4. I'd probably just say, know who you are. Be open to the world, but be strong. Because it does take some strength, and it's good to be strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Tracey Lee Holmes, your book is The Eye of the Dragonfly, My Life Seeing the World Through Sport. Your writing in this book through your lens is absolutely superb. It's a brilliant piece. It's as I said before, I admit I don't always read all books that come across my desk. I absolutely love this book. It certainly made a personal impact on me when I read it. I'm so glad that when we reached out to you and you said, yes, I will come on Soul Sentred, the podcast, Soul Sentred with an S, it's not a C. We were so thrilled. Thank you so much for taking the time to write this, to put this together. It's a memoir, but it's more. It definitely is more. And we, as I said before, absolutely encourage everybody to go out and get a copy of this book. Tracey Lee Holmes, thank you so much, and we wish you all the best for the future. We'd love to have you back again in the future, because I think we've got so much more to talk about.
I'm sure we could talk for days, Jaynie.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you to you too, because I'm going to hop on the plane now and start reading this time next year your book. So thank you so much, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you
Thanks
too.
for having me.
Thank you, Tracey. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Soul Sentred. As I said before, with an S, it's SOULSENTRED, the podcast. Of course, we did mention that it is also on YouTube, on our Soul Sentred YouTube channel. Now, I know you're never going to want to miss an episode, so you know exactly what to do. Go to our website, soulcentre.com, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. But the most important thing right now, Tracey Lee Holmes has written this incredible book, The Eye of the Dragonfly. It is a beautiful read. It's a powerful read. And yes, Jaynie Morris does encourage you to go out and get a copy right now or listen to it on Audible as well. So wherever you are in this amazing, beautiful world of ours, I hope you're having an absolute fabulous day or night, whatever time or day that you are tuning into us. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having your company next on Soul Centred, the podcast.